So as you heard Gigi talk about our method at MIT's NewDigs program, we like to start with case studies and then have more generalizable learning. So if this was a bit of a case study of a disease ecosystem to some extent, Gigi's now going to talk about the more general ways of designing them.
Okay, I know you guys are starting to get hungry, so I'm going to talk fast. And we also have moved Don Berwick's video up a little bit in the schedule because we were afraid more of you were going to start leaving, and we didn't want you to miss it. It's a little treasure. So I'm not actually seeing things on my screen down here, guys. So here's where we are. We're in the final phases here. And as we said before, the 4 modules are a build. So we're now moving towards action. And Mark has already pretty much introduced the overarching themes. This is about big system change that we're talking about. This at 3:30 this morning when I was working on my slides, this seemed appropriate, and Matthew, I think Matthew is still here. This is a follow-up to your comment yesterday. I don't know, I've always loved this quote. Maybe it's because I'm a shrink, but a shrink turned into a systems engineer. But pretty important themes here. It keeps coming up. If it weren't for the people, the goddamn people, always getting tangled up in the machinery. If it weren't for them, the world would be an engineer's paradise. So we kind of have to keep that in mind as we move into the LEAPS project. I wanted to just share some of my musings on, how did the idea of LEAPS come from platform trials? And here's how it went in my head, and some of it was from talking with people, especially Janet and Ann Barker yesterday in preparation for this over the last few months, listening to them talk about what needs to happen next with platform trials. It is, okay, we need industry to buy into these so that they can take it over, meaning fund them, right, and be in it for the long haul, so then they become sustainable. And what's that going to take? And they both said that yesterday as well. And so I was really thinking about this, and I'm quite mesmerized by the idea of these platform trials, but honestly, and I know Mark disagrees with me on this, I'm not 100% sure that just platform trials alone is going to do it. I think they're remarkable, but I was thinking, well, what else could we throw in that would really make these more likely to be sustainable? And as I thought about that, it seemed to me that the real value proposition here might be if we begin to think really differently about knowledge, the knowledge across the entire end-to-end system about a disease. If we could continue to build on the platform capabilities, not just for the clinical trial, but through the whole story, and we could enhance our capacity to accelerate and scale knowledge about a disease, that could really be a game changer. If that was an ongoing, continuous process and the whole system kept getting more and more intelligent, everything would start to get better. And we would want to leverage platforms wherever we could because it creates all kinds of operational efficiencies. And supposing that we said that the only way that you could access that knowledge, that really rich knowledge that's getting richer every day, is that you have to participate in that ecosystem, okay? And so it's not really just about getting industry to buy in. I think we're going to have to shift gears a little bit on that. Everybody's going to have to participate. Everybody's going to have to contribute in a variety of different ways. It's not just about industry putting in the money to make these things sustainable. Everybody has something of value to offer to make this a better ecosystem, and similarly, everyone should benefit from it, and I mean all the stakeholders. So that's what led me to LEAPS. That's where that came from. And how are we going to do it? because the question is really where do you begin, because it's really quite large, that vision. So I think what we do, and I think it's applicable, I'd like to think it's applicable. We've been applying our methodology to individual products, but I think this could be applied to a scaled up system as well. You have to start with the right stakeholders. Once you know what your ecosystem is going to focus on, you got to get the right stakeholders in the room. You have to take the broad view of not just a product, but the disease. And you have to really begin, I think, by understanding what is meaningful value to each of those stakeholders, because if they don't see the value proposition, they're not going to come in. And that is number one. That's the first step. Everybody has to see that they're going to get more value the new way than the old way. In keeping with our philosophy in adaptive biomedical innovation, the goal here is to move the needle a lot for patients, but keep everybody else's head still above water. So everybody, as we said just before, will still win. They might win a little bit less, but patients should win a lot more. And then we have lots of toys in our sandbox that we can start playing with, lots of amazing innovations, one-off innovations. Let's bring them on in and figure out how to use them. And let's use things like interactive simulations and gaming to get us to start working together in fundamentally different ways. And let's start looking at that data and the evidence generation capacity that we have now. And I mean, thinking about what Sandy Pentland was just talking about, I mean, wow. That could be pretty astonishing. We've got a lot of things that can help us get there. And so that's where we would begin with this. The LEAPS project, I think that if we do this well, we need to be able to demonstrate impact at 3 different levels of the system. One is with new product innovation, one is with regimen development, and one is overall for that disease. There should be 3 levels of value that we're driving here. And we'll go over this in more detail at the end of the day. Again, everybody has to benefit or it's not going to work. Everybody does. I just wanted to share with you very briefly a way that we work with different stakeholders, because if we're thinking about, at the core here, this is about a new kind of a learning engine, as we're calling it. I've already started to get a lot of questions from people and even from the media saying, oh, are we going to use AI in this? Are we going to use machine learning? And I'm like, okay, in our system, we don't start there. We turn it upside down, and we start with who are the stakeholders, what are the decisions they have to make, and what are the critical questions that have to be answered for them to make those decisions. And then we say, what's that evidence need to look like? What are the requirements that it would be considered fit for purpose by that decision maker? And Sebastian has done, so I don't know if Sebastian is still here, but he's played a key role in our thinking on this as well, the MVET criteria, and he has a paper out on that. And then you start to look at the data and the analytic methods. But we use this framework. It's kind of not a very elegant framework. It's quite primitive, but it's remarkably helpful, because otherwise you start getting into arguments, and it's because you're operating at different levels of the cake. So we have found this very helpful, and I think that we will be applying this in this work moving forward with LEAPS. And this is our modified 3-layer cake, which is just, you don't need to look at all the details on it, but it is looking at all of the kinds of questions that are being answered now with data that is not fit for purpose. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of questions that must be answered that can never be answered through those randomized controlled clinical trials that are required for regulatory approval now. So this is bear with me on this. I'm notoriously bad with graphics, but I tried to do a picture of what I thought this learning engine might look like, because somebody asked me to draw it for them, so I tried. And there is a picture of a cloud there, but it's not cloud like in the way that we think about a cloud thing yet. So it's just that we're sort of organizing this into a space. But the idea of this LEAPS learning engine is that every player, except the regulators, I haven't figured out the regulators, every other player is generating evidence in the course of their daily work. And we would want to leverage that data when it's appropriate, but every one of those players also has to make decisions that their data alone can't answer. So the idea here is that we want to leverage everyone's data where it's appropriate, only where it's fit for purpose, but we want to give everyone the benefit of the collective data because they will be able to make better decisions that way. And that's what that cartoon means. We're going to have to hire a graphics person because that's just not going to do it. But you get the general idea. And again, we're back to this LEAPS vision, which we'll talk about at the end of the day. So now we're moving into what I think is a really exciting part of the program, which is to look at how do you change these very, very complicated systems. Is there any hope at all? And I think we'll find this afternoon that there is hope. And we're going to be hearing from some very seasoned folks and some very inspired folks. And I'm going to just now, I think we should just transition over to the video now. I want to give just a little bit of background on Don Berwick. So I don't know how many of you in the audience know Don. I had the honor of practicing medicine in the same clinic setting in Harvard Community Health Plan. We both worked there at the same time. He did pediatrics, I did emergency medicine, and he's an amazing guy all around. I know Kay has also had a chance to work with him in another context. And for those of you who don't know Don, so he was a clinician, then he started up the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. He has been very, very successful in driving large-scale change in healthcare delivery systems, and he has a global following. He's remarkable. Then he went to become the administrator of CMS under Obama for 18 months, unfortunately only for 18 months, because he was doing some incredible things there. Then he ran for governor, and he didn't get elected, but he got a pretty good showing. I invited Don to come and talk with us, but they have their annual summit for IHI this week in Florida. That's a much better idea than having this meeting here. But he did agree to let me interview him. Here are the questions that I asked him, and you're going to hear his responses. It's just 10 minutes. I know we're all really hungry, but it's really worth the wait. So Don, I asked him first about the concept of a learning system, and I said to him, in the current model of drug development, learning about a new drug essentially stops at the point of regulatory approval. And for those of you who would take issue with that, and I know there's some, that was a quote from Janet Woodcock. That is Janet saying that. Okay, so you have always advocated that learning needs to be systemic. So how do we extend the boundaries of the healthcare learning system to bridge pharmaceutical R&D with care delivery? That was my first question. The second question is, okay, what do we do to advance this vision? How do we make it happen? And the third question is this. In our work in New Digs, we've gained a healthy respect for the different cultures that exist within the stakeholder silos, and in some cases, the lack of trust between them. In your opinion, what sort of leadership model is required for success in designing and implementing this vision of a truly connected R&D and patient care system? So I'm going to sit down now, and I'm going to let Don talk and enjoy.
Let me say how much I wish it could be in person. It's lovely of you to give me a chance to join you virtually, but best of all to be in the room. So thank you for this chance, and I regret I'm not there in person. I think all of healthcare, including medication use, is, if it's properly done, it's co-produced, it's co-developed. Believe me, the patient, the family, they know more than we do about the medications and their effects. And we just don't ask them. We don't ask them at the level of narration and relationship that really makes a difference. So I think there's a whole frontier here, but it means tearing down the boundaries. It means that you're never done. The drug has a journey through time and space, which we need to follow, and we need the help and wisdom of patients and families to do that. We need clinicians in the same room as the drug developers, and see this as an overall learning process. The fragmentation, the silos, the I'm done, now it's yours, that stands in our way. It's not the way to learn in the modern era. I remember, I have a very important story in my career about this, which is in cystic fibrosis. We had a problem. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation was sitting on a lot of data. They knew the performance, so I think it was about 160 CF centers around the country. They were voluntarily contributing to the CF database. But under the charter, the data were anonymized, blinded. So you could see that center number 123 was doing fantastic at lung function preservation, let's say, but you couldn't find out who that center was. Why? Well, because there was a fear that if we unblinded, then the centers that performed well would tout it and use it for advertising, stealing market share, and the centers that were performing poorly would be injured somehow economically or reputationally. And so the rule was don't share. But that was inhibiting learning. Because if center 123 was doing great on lung function and I wasn't, what an opportunity there is to go visit him and find out. So the project I'm talking about, we were invited, IHI and others, to come in and say, how can we get to knowledge, to learning? And in the room was Honor Page. Honor was on a board, I believe, of Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center and the mother of a child with cystic fibrosis, an adolescent girl. And she'd become involved in this. And I remember turning to Honor Page and said, Ms. Page, what do you think about this fear of sharing data? What would you tell the CEOs? And she said, I'd tell them that for my daughter, the clock is ticking. And it turned the room. You know, people started, oh, wait a minute. We got some duties here. And they override the tribalism. When you put the patient at the center and you say our job is to help them, then cultural barriers are narcissism. It's waste. It's self-indulgence. And yes, I know you have a culture, and I know I do too. But look, there's a person there, and their future, their well-being, their thriving, their lifespan depends on us. We're taking an enormous liberty when we let what we're calling culture lead us to close doors and not listen. Look, quality is all about cooperation. And that's because we need to learn to improve. And the learning, it courses through time and space. So yeah, with drugs and drug development, we're not done when the drug's improved. We're never done. Every individual patient is an opportunity to learn something we didn't know before. That's true, I think, in the world of drug development, because I think we really, especially now with big data available, artificial intelligence, machine learning, I think with proper data, we could learn so much about what medicines can do for whom, when, at a level of granularity never before achievable. That's just from the development side, but that doesn't end when it's improved. That's a commitment to ongoing learning. More than that, in the clinical world, when you use a medication on a patient, every single time it's a test. You're trying something out, and you may think you've been there, done that, and now you have the drug. No. What happened to Mrs. Jones? What happened at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock? And what are the subtleties that she now knows that you don't? And I think that individualization, the N of one thinking in the use not just of drugs, this applies to all interventions, all diagnostic modalities as well as therapies. It's uncharted territory. Every doctor is a researcher if she or he wants to be, because every patient provides a laboratory. Moving a learning system forward is hard. It takes time and resources. People are so busy, but if you're going to follow a process over time and space, like what is this drug doing? You got to invest in that, and so we have to give continuous learning the dignity it deserves, represented in investment, not just attitudes. I think the key is what the New Digs project is doing right now. You got to be in the same room. The fragmentation kills us, and this is about people, and so I don't see a way to learn without being in relationship, and I don't think there's a way to be in relationship without building relationships. And that's really hard in a stressed world where you can barely get through your day to say, now we got to go to somebody else's house and be a guest for a while. I think that requires some investment, that energy that we may feel we lack, but there's no other way. Once the relationships are there, then it's process. Then you have to figure out, well, how will we do this together? But it starts by being in the same room. Now, what can leaders do? model the change. I mean, my mentor and friend, Paul Batalden, who helped found IHI, once showed me a diagram about leadership behaviors in pursuit of improvement. It was a flow diagram, but at the top box, he wrote the word curiosity. I said, Paul, what is that about? He said, curiosity. If the leader isn't evincing authentic curiosity, humility about what they know, then it's not going to go well. Well, if you're authentically curious, you leave your office, you leave your room, you leave your culture, and you go somewhere else. So I actually think leadership behaviors matter a lot. I do have a request for the New Digs effort. It has to do with aims. So IHI, in maybe 2007, 2008, we published the triple aim. That was the invention of two colleagues of mine, John Whittington, a doctor in Peoria, Illinois, and Tom Nolan, my mentor and one of the great scholars of improvement in the world. Tom and John have been working together, and I remember them coming in and saying, in the world of quality, aim is everything. You never improve by accident. You have to know what you're trying to get done. Maybe it's robbing a bank, but you have to know what you're trying to get done. Then you can improve process. He said, well, what are we trying to get done here? The whole world thing, all $3 trillion in the United States, all the pursuit of all these professions. And they said, well, it's a triple aim, a system of aims. Better care. So if you're in care, it goes well. The Institute of Medicine framework, safe, effective, patient-centered, timely, efficient, equitable, those 6 qualities, that's a better care. If you have your heart attack, safe, effective, patient-centered, timely, efficient, equitable care. But the heart attack came from somewhere, and we all know that isn't healthcare. Healthcare doesn't produce health. It's a repair shop. What produces health is elsewhere. It's nutrition and exercise and the environment, the air we breathe. It's social justice. It's fairness in society. It's racism or its absence. And if we want to work on well-being, we have to leave healthcare and work on the determinants. So there's a second set of, in the triple aim, better care, better health, but there's a third one, lower cost. At $3 trillion a year, this healthcare system in this country is confiscating resources, confiscating public resources from governments that need that money for housing and schools and roads and community well-being, and it's confiscating it from private sector actors, companies that want to be globally competitive, and workers, laborers who want to send their kids to college or go to a movie. And we don't have a right to it, and the evidence is very, very clear that of the $3 trillion we're spending in the U.S., $1 trillion is waste. It's pure waste, and I think that's an underestimate. We don't have a right to that. And Nolan and Whittington are right. Better care, better health, and lower costs. That's got to be our bogey. So I think we all have a role in this. I think part of the cooperative endeavor that we need right across the stakeholder groups, the stakeholders in this room at this conference, is the triple aim, including lower cost. I don't mean hand-waving about this. I mean lower cost. And I hope that in the pursuit of the New Digs project and the idea of building continuity, we put that aim fair and square in the center of the agenda. And I plead with the people that you're pulling together in this project to say out loud, American healthcare costs too much, and it's confiscating money it shouldn't be using, and we need to return that money. Good news is we can do it, but only if we cooperate. So the ethos of New Digs, the idea we're going to get people together and work across boundaries, that's tonic to my soul, if you guys are serious about it.
So with those words, we invite you to food for both your body and perhaps food for your discussions over lunch. We'll rejoin here at 2 o'clock as we'll hear about how to manage complex adaptive systems by one of the premier thought leaders in that.